Olá a todos que estão nos assistindo aqui na TV GGN. Temos como honrosa convidada Clara Mattei. Ela é pesquisadora, professora do Departamento de Economia da The New School for Social Research de Nova York, que é um centro de economia referente no mundo. Nós vamos falar sobre o seu livro, A Ordem do Capital, como economistas inventaram a austeridade e abriram caminho para o fascismo, lançado no Brasil agora pela Boitempo. A conversa vai ser em inglês, então eu peço a todos, por gentileza, que ativem aqui embaixo a configuração do YouTube para a legenda, tá bom? Vamos lá, pessoal, vamos começar. Clara, welcome. Thank you so much for accepting us and sharing a little bit of your knowledge. Let's start talking directly about your book, The Capital Order. Tell us about the relation between the fascism and austerity, and straight to the point, what was the conclusions about your research over 10 years now?
Thank you. The Capital Order, my book, looks at history in order to give us some important tips about how to be critical about the current circumstances. And the overarching message is that austerity is intrinsically connected to capitalism, to our current economic system, because it does something very fundamental for our system, which is preserve the fact that people have no alternative but to go work for a low wage. And this is really the wage relations are what ground our economic growth and our capitalist economy. And though this is not a natural given, it's something that the state has to actively, constantly protect in order to make sure that people do not think that they can have an alternative way of existing, cannot get imaginative about a different way to organize our economy. So austerity is there to tell us that we have to bend our necks and accept our condition as vulnerable, low-paid wage workers. This is the outcome of what you see if you look at history. And what you see also if you look at history is that there is a very, very big tension between capitalism and democracy. Austerity to work requires strong states, requires strong governments, and possibly prefers fascisms rather than democratic participation. So this is what you see, is that the birthplace of fascism, Italy, Benito Mussolini came into power in 1922. In Italy, he came into power with the agenda of crushing workers' mobilization. What I tell in the book is the story that after the First World War, in the hub of our capitalist economy in Western Europe, there were many experiments for a different society, experiments that were really putting at the center the participation of workers in the factories and in the countryside, and the idea of producing for need rather than profit. So experiments that were going to potentially propose a society that looked very different was quashed by austerity, and this happened very well, very swiftly in Italy because of the strong hand of Benito Mussolini. And the reason why I say that economists paved the way to fascism is because Mussolini became stronger because of the support that economists, mainstream economists, the founding fathers of the type of economic theory that is still dominant today. These economists were also liberal economists, so they thought they were liberals, but they were basically very strongly supporting Mussolini's regime. And this is true both for economists in Italy, but also for economists in the United States and in Britain. And I use archival work to really show how much the financial liberal establishment adored Mussolini because of his capacity to appease the population, curtail strikes, cut down wages, privatize, lay off public employees, do the whole austerity recipe very swiftly.
Perfect, Clara. About that, I have some questions sent to me by the journalist Luis Nassif, who has a large experience in economy journalism. And if you can talk about the future of the union organizations, considering the labor market revolution and trade union decline.
Yes, at present, yes. Before I do that,
At present.
I would like to stress that another important finding of this historical research is to debunk and overcome the false dichotomy between the market and the state. And what is usually said is that austerity is less state and more market. And actually, what I try to show is that the point here is that the market always requires the state. The point is what type of state interventionism. And what you see is that austerity is all about shifting resources away from working people in favor of the saving, investing minority. So again, it is not less state, is the state acting in a classist way, our government's acting in a classist way to subordinate and weaken the majority in favor of the minority who gets enriched by the functioning of our capitalist economy. So this is very important. And I think this is connected to the question, because austerity, I just would like to define it just because we're talking about it and we didn't define it yet. Austerity needs to be thought as more than just fiscal policies. Austerity, as I see it, is a trinity of policies that operate justified by very, very strong theories. And this trinity of policy is first fiscal. So it's about the fact that the state cuts social expenditure. Again, austerity is not just about budget cuts. That's the general picture that doesn't tell us anything. If you look at the United States right now, you might think that there's no austerity. There is austerity because the state is spending money on the war, on the military industrial complex, on rescuing banks, on subsidizing private investors like asset managers. But in the meantime, it's cutting on social expenditures. It's cutting on schools, on healthcare, on transportation, on unemployment benefits, all of the resources for the people. So this is important. Fiscal austerity is about the fact that the state, again, decides where to spend, and it spends away from us. At the same time, fiscal austerity is not just about tax increases. It's about regressive taxation. So it's about increasing taxes on the common people. So increases consumption taxes, for example, taxes on bread, on cigarettes, on gas, while you cut taxes on the rich. So you cut inheritance taxes, you cut corporate taxes, you cut profit taxes. Again, this is what the state does, right? And this helps because at once it weakens us, but it empowers those who supposedly are leading the economy. So this is fiscal austerity. Then we have monetary austerity, which is increases in interest rates. And this is something we're very familiar with because we've seen increases in interest rates, and this is happening also in Brazil. So the fact is that increases in interest rate is not something neutral that the state does. And here I answer the question. Interest rates is not neutral, that is done for the good of everyone. My book tries to tell you there's no economic policy that is neutral. All economic policies have effects on different classes that are different. There's always winners and losers, and the majority are the losers. So what you see here is that interest rate hikes not only make it harder for people to take a mortgage, to take money to live, while of course those who have capital make a lot of money right now lending capital, right? You get a lot of interest on your capital if you have capital right now. But it's worse. What happens is that interest rate going up have the effect of increasing unemployment. Why? Because it has an effect of a recession on the economy. So there's less job openings, there's more unemployment. And this is done on purpose because the whole point here is to weaken the bargaining power of the unions and of organized labor. So what we see here is that when workers try to mobilize, and this was what happened after the First World War, the story I tell in the book, but it happens again even now in the United States, when workers try to mobilize, try to ask for better conditions, and even to find different ways of running the economy, rejecting exploitation as the basis of our economy. And our economy is based on exploitation, meaning that the majority, the workers, produce much more value than the value they put in their pockets. So it doesn't matter how much you get paid. The point is that you're always producing more value with respect to the value that you get in your paycheck. And this is technically exploitation. So the moment in which workers are trying to go beyond exploitation, this is when austerity is very powerful, because it increases unemployment, increases our vulnerability. The fact that we need to pay for school and healthcare, for example, means that we need to go to work. So it increases the economic compulsion of us having to go to work in order to exist. And if you have to go to work and the labor market is bad because interest rates have caused a recession, this plays in favor of increasing the rate of exploitation because you can keep wages lower. Okay. So, and then there's industrial austerity, just to conclude. Industrial austerity is about privatizing. The state sells off. So the state actively sells off the industries so that workers get from being public employees with rights, are thrown into the impersonal competition of market forces that brings down the reservation wage. Then industrial austerity is about labor deregulation, making us all very precarious, again, hitting the unions, and fundamentally keeping wages low. So this is the trinity of austerity that serves the common purpose of preserving the capital order. Now, what happens? What is the future of the unions? Of course, the point is that as the history of capitalism progresses, austerity is implemented more forcefully and more intelligently in ways that are also hidden, because in a way we know that under authoritarian regimes, austerity is very explicit. Take, for example, the case of Pinochet in Chile. It was very explicit that in order to implement Il Ladrillo, you needed to also kill political opposition, jail people. The same happened with Mussolini. Mussolini outlawed unions and made strikes illegal and used the law to bring down wages. So we see that these cases are very explicit repression that goes with austerity. But then there's also other cases like what we see today in many other liberal settings and democratic settings, is that austerity works in a way that is more less explicit, more it's hidden, and so for example, the way they do it in democratic settings is with independent central banks. So the importance of the independent central banks are a way to exclude people from decision on monetary policies, so that the central bank can in fact increase interest rates without any opposition. And this is a way to, again, do austerity without eliminating the possibility of people opposing it, right? So again, there's degrees in which you can de-democratize the economic sphere. And in current democracies, in Italy, for example, you put the balanced budget in the constitution. So it becomes a technical matter and people cannot oppose austerity, right? But it's still the same way of de-democratizing the economic space. So what is the impact on unions? Well, they get weakened, of course. And this is the whole point. Again, austerity, unfortunately, is not a mistake. It's wrong to see it as a mistake because that's too naive. It's not a mistake. It's purposefully there to tame class struggle and to maintain the balance of forces in favor of employees and not in favor of workers. Now, I would like to say, though, that as people who look at history critically, we also know that unions can get weakened by austerity, but the class struggle is never over. Capitalism is not a fixed natural system that is going to last forever. It's based on political relations. It's based on the fact that we do have to accept the current condition. And this is why ultimately workers, given that they're the majority, are always strong and can always mobilize. And this we're seeing very well in the United States today. Workers are winning a lot of battles. The automobile workers, for example, went on strike for a long time, and and just got very good results. And there's many struggles always happening that challenge the capital order. So what I want to say is, of course, unions get weakened by austerity, but this doesn't mean that austerity will win forever. The point is to understand that it is a tool of class oppression that we can mobilize against once we understand that capitalism is not a universal, eternal economic system, but is a system that is specific and is based on our exploitation.
Perfect, Clara. Based on this, how do you see the government's new ways, the new economy can be applied, and the decline of the Western democracy?
The question is, how do I see potential alternatives?
Yes, sure, of economics.
Yes. So yes, I think we are in a historical moment in which the contradictions of our economic system are under everyone's eyes. And this is very good because it makes it such that we are in a moment in which the ideological consensus for our economic system is shaking. And this goes against the economic theories that dominate today, the economic theory of the mainstream economics that justify austerity policies, which tell us that austerity is a technical necessity and that the only society we can think of is a society in which the savers, investors, the entrepreneur leads the economy, and the workers have to have this passive role of just accepting their subordination. Okay, so these economic models that put the entrepreneur at the center of the economy and deny that there is classes and conflict, and instead see everything as very harmonic, as very beneficial for everyone, as ultimately the market as the space where everyone can thrive. This is clearly something that people do not believe anymore because they see it every day when they wake up. They feel the economic coercion on them. They feel like they have no space but to try to survive in very precarious conditions without any social rights. So it's a moment, I think, in which even if austerity works well to make us so vulnerable that we have very little space, we feel like we have very little space to even meet and talk about alternatives with our neighbors because we are spending our time concentrated on trying to get to the end of the month. I do think that it's a moment in which, especially with the current inequalities, the current climate crisis, the current wars, people are really, really tired of hearing the usual narrative of economists that tell us that everything is going well and that this is the only way forward. So alternatives, I think there's many circulating, many that are not talked about. And I think the role of scholars and television that is critical is to explore these alternatives. There's the neighborhood councils, for example, in Chile that are still strong in the sense of people getting together and wanting to seek autonomy with respect to the market in organizing their material conditions. So in producing and distributing in a way that is democratic, there's participation, and there's also a sense by which, yes, we are in charge and we can, in a way, work without market dependence. And this is, for example, very big is La Via Campesina now of these peasant organizations in the south of the globe that are saying we are the one who are producing the food, but we're the ones who are hungry because the corporations that employ us then export the food and we are left with nothing. But there's a sense by which we can actually self-organize and, again, go against market dependence. But this market dependence is what austerity and the IMF and the World Bank and all these institutions still try to impose. So I think the key here is to understand the limits of the system so that we can become imaginative and understand that we can claim space and agency in the economic sphere. The economic sphere should not be left to economic experts because the economic experts do not do our interest. So we need to participate in first person. I'm not the one who should tell how to do this. I think this happens in participation, but I do think that economic ideas of the critical type that I do develop in my book can help the current mobilization towards an economy that says, no, we do not agree that the only thing to do is to cut the social expenditures and to privatize. There's other ways, more sustainable ways in which we can understand our society.
Perfect. Clara, returning to the subject of fascism, thinking about the expensive number of supporters of this new fascism wave, including some global leaders like Trump, Bolsonaro in Brazil. Now we have Milei in Argentina, not only on our continent, and there's more. How do you think this history that you narrate to us will be realized in the future?
So I think it is quite a different context from the original emergence of Mussolini as the first fascist and the original fascist dictatorship, because, as I said, Mussolini gained support because workers were strong in Italy. The factory councils were real. They had occupied industries all over Italy, and peasants were running agriculture independently. So there was a big surge of worker self-management and ultimately calls for a post-capitalist society. So Mussolini comes to power to quell the force of workers. Now we are in a situation in which I think we're seeing politically the results of the success of austerity. Austerity is very successful in making us feel like we can't do anything. We feel impotent, and especially we don't feel like we have solidarity with other workers, and we do not have solidarity with people who are weaker than us. Actually, we hate migrants. We hate those who supposedly are taking away our livelihood. So what we see here is that people have internalized the austerity message in thinking that there's no alternative but to hate the ones who are weaker, and the sense of ultimately giving up on anything and just kind of falling into the trap of then voting for those who supposedly should change economics as it is done. Now, what we see is that, of course, I take the example of Giorgia Meloni in Italy. Giorgia Meloni came to power pretending she was going to do something for these people who had lost their voice and who had been made vulnerable by austerity, because austerity had been operating for decades now, all over the world, not just in Brazil. So what we see, though, is that once someone like Meloni or someone like Bolsonaro do come in government, what they do is more austerity, right? So it's in a way, it's interesting because, again, we have the same symbiotic relation between austerity, neoclassical economics, and strong governments. So Meloni is doing even more austerity than the technocrats that were in power before her. More austerity than Draghi, more austerity than the Monti, which were very austerity regimes. So I think this is what we need to know, is that if we read history, we understand that authoritarianism is not against capitalism. It works in favor of supporting the capital order and is able to do even better this austerity agenda. So if we learn that, then I think this is a message that can empower people, because we realize that we need to seek a true alternative, and we can't just once more delegate to a leader who pretends he will do something different and then again proposes austerity, which again, of course, is something that the investment markets are happy about. We get good ratings. International investors are very happy, but the people are not happy because the people are losing.
Perfect, Clara. About your book, how do you believe can help to understand this scenario? And researchers like yours and from Piketty can promote a new discussion about the role of economists in the public policies.
Yes, I think a message that I've seen people get very excited about is when someone who is an economist tells them that economics is not a hard objective science, that economics is not something that only economists should do, because it's a social science that, again, participates in the class warfare. And it is a way to, again, subordinate the people to a system that works against them, even if it is a system that works because of them, right? Capitalism is a system that is based on our capacity to work, and are selling our capacity to work in return for a wage that is less than the value we produce. This is something that is deeply political. So the message here is that economics is political. Economics as a discipline and our economic system is political. And this is why we should understand that any theory helps us see the world in a different way, right? You wear a different lens if you accept a certain theory. So if you accept a theory that tells us that the market economy is the only possible economy, you get stuck in a situation of feeling that there's nothing left that one can do. Instead, if you realize that these economic theory were participating in hating workers, I have very strong quotes in the book in which the founding fathers of mainstream economics were saying that workers were pigs, that workers were lazy, that workers should be just quashed and substituted with the entrepreneur. If we understand that the models that look very mathematical and very neutral are instead based on very classist assumptions that want to disempower us, this is a message that can make us stand up and want to instead fight for an economics that is actually for us, not against us. And this goes with the same idea that if we understand that our economic system is not a system that is good for us, but is a system that works against us, then we also want to mobilize not to just to change ideas, but to change the type of economic system that we support. So the message, I think, of these theories is to say that the history of capitalism is a history that is not necessary, and that thus can change. And this is why we need new ways of looking at the world, so that we can indeed inspire people to not give up and to insist in wanting a real alternative, not just a fake one.
Perfect. Thank you, Clara. So we come to the end. Thank you so much for your time and your explanations and this little class given to us.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure. I hope we talk soon.
Thank you.